Have you ever thought about how detectives know whose DNA is at a crime scene? There are many processes that detectives go through to determine whose DNA was at the crime scene. In this speech, I'm going to talk about the process of collecting DNA evidence, the most common sources of DNA found at crime scenes, and the confusion that comes with twins' DNA found at crime scenes. There is a misconception in today's society on how detectives collect DNA at a crime scene. I want to educate you on the correct process of how the DNA is collected. According to science.howstuffworks.com, fingerprinting was the gold standard for linking suspects to a crime scene. Today, the gold standard is DNA evidence because DNA can be collected virtually anywhere. The correct process of collecting DNA is extraction, which is the process of releasing DNA from the cell. Then quantitation is the process of determining how much DNA you have. Then amplification is the process of producing multiple copies of DNA to characterize it. After that, separation is the process of separating amplified DNA product to promote subsequent identification. Next is the analysis and interpretation, which is the process of quantitatively and qualitatively comparing DNA evidenced samples to known DNA profiles. The last process is quality assurance, which is the process of reviewing and analyzing reports for technical accuracy. This process usually takes anywhere from 24 to 72 hours to be collected, processed, and evaluated. Secondly, I would like to talk about the 5 most common sources of DNA evidence. These include blood, saliva, plucked hairs, dead skin samples, and clothing. If and when detectives discover any one of those types of DNA at a crime scene, they will conduct interviews and interrogations, examine records and documents, observe the activities of suspects, and participate and conduct raids and/or arrests. As I said earlier, those are the 5 most common sources of evidence found at the crime scene, but leftover blood is the most common and easiest to identify and find DNA from. According to forensicscience.simplified.org, cigarette butts can also be a very useful source of evidence because it can be dried saliva, dead skin particles, and hair follicles. Also, the best evidence occurs when a person's DNA is found where it's not supposed to be. Lastly, I would like to discuss the confusion that comes with twin DNA found at the crime scene. Specifically, identical twins have similar DNA, so if one twin commits a crime, it becomes hard to tell which one committed it. The most effective way that detectives decipher between twins, it becomes twin DNA would be fingerprinting. When it comes to conducting the investigation on identical twins, it can be very difficult for eyewitnesses to tell them because they look so similar. This is why eyewitnesses can rarely be held up in the court of law. In conclusion, we talked about the process of collecting evidence, the most common sources of DNA found at crime scenes, and the confusion that comes with DNA found at crime scenes. I would like to end by saying that if you are to commit a crime in today's society, that there's a very high probability that you will get caught. Thank you.